We are doing an episode off of pure vibes as the New York Mets defeat the Philadelphia Phillies 4-1. They win the NLDS by a count of 3-1, and they are moving on to the NLCS for the first time since 2015. And a big round of applause because he is back on the show. And we were just talking in the pre-show that this is the first episode that Jack has done during the actual postseason. The last time Jack was on this show was going into the Brave series. And folks, Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you on the Bleav in the Mets podcast. Think about how long that feels, how long ago all that stuff was. Jack is back on the show. We don't have our prepared notes like we normally do. We're going off of pure vibes. Jack, I said it to you in our pre-show. There are no words. We're going to try to do it. We are going to try to have words, but this is going to be pure adrenaline, pure vibes. We are recording this. Normally we wait like 12 hours to kind of let our thoughts settle. We're doing this like 2 hours after the game has been over. The Mets are moving on to the NLCS. They are just 4 wins away from going back to the World Series. Think about whether or not that would have been a sentence on your mind throughout the entirety of the 2024 season. Yet here we are. How are you doing, my friend? Welcome back from London.
I like you said, I don't really have words. It's just, I feel like I've lived a lifetime or 2 or 3 since we last recorded, just based on everything that's happened. The last time we talked, the Mets needed to win 1 game in Atlanta to make the postseason in the first place. And game 1 of that doubleheader nearly killed me. We were texting back and forth during it, and I was watching in the airport. I quite literally dramatically fell to my knees when Ozzy Albies hit his go-ahead double in the 8th inning, and then I fell to my knees again when Lindor hit the go-ahead in the 9th. And then the whole Brewer series I wasn't able to see much of because I was abroad with a different time zone, but I caught 100% of this Phillies series, and I'm speechless. I've been in shock this whole time. I don't know if it's the jet lag or the emotion or what, but the Mets are 4 wins away from going to the World Series, and I can't believe it.
This team just has a special aura around them, and I think that's the only way to describe it. They're a good baseball team. They're a talented baseball team. I think this is, and no offense to the team that I'm about to throw out there, I think this is very different than what the Tigers are doing. This is just a team that dug themselves a massive hole in the early going, despite a organization that believed that they put together a product that could make a run to be a wild card team and to make the playoffs. And then they dug themselves out of that hole by proceeding to play the best baseball in all of baseball the remainder of the way. And it is a shock to us that they're sitting here in the NLCS, but it really shouldn't be when you consider the way they have played since being 11 games below 500. But it's the way they're doing it. It is just the new inventive ways. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to make it a word here for the vibes, that this team just wins baseball games in the postseason. I mean, in the last week, they've had 3 of the biggest games in Mets history. When you think of the game on Monday in Atlanta, when you think of game 3 in the Brewer series, and then you think of the comeback in game 1, it doesn't count in the long run, but the comeback in game 2 where they tied it up after giving up the lead twice. I mean, this team just always finds a way. We're going to try to recap the series. We're going to try to preview who they're going to play. We're going to try to get to it all. But before we go into any of that, before we discuss Francisco Lindor's Grand Slam, before we discuss the comeback in game 1, whether or not they're going to play the Brewers, the Dodgers or the Padres, because that game is ongoing as we speak, and it looks like the Dodgers are going to force a game 5 there. I got to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And I guess we will start this recap. We normally go in chronological order here. And I thought about, Jack, you'll understand this because you and I were texting back and forth. And I know the listeners have not heard from you in a while. My phone has got a lot of messages. You and I have been texting and DMing on Twitter while you were overseas in England. We were texting back and forth a ton during this last couple of games for the New York Mets. But let's go back to game 1 because I thought about doing a podcast after the game 1 win. I didn't. And then after they lost in game 2, I'm like, all right, well, I can't do a podcast now. And then they won game 3. And I'm like, well, now I certainly can't do a podcast because I can't. Jack's back. I don't want to ruin the opportunity. So I'm like, all right, when the series is over, we'll come back, we'll reconvene, and we'll do a podcast. And here we are. And let's talk about game 1 because all things considered, I think this is where the series was won for the New York Mets, because I think the moment that you were able to take the best punch that the Philadelphia Phillies had, and the best punch this team was able to offer you was an absolutely brilliant performance from Zach Wheeler. And of course, it had to be Zach Wheeler in game one to deliver this performance. But he's arguably a top 3 pitcher in all of baseball. He's probably a top 2 pitcher in all of baseball. Probably him and Tariq Skubal as who your 1 and 1A are in baseball right now. And he had this team mystified offensively. They were confused. 30 swings and misses. He dominated for 7 innings of this game. But the New York Mets do what the New York Mets have done all year long, and they had a massive rally to win this game 6-2. And we'll talk about game 2 and the counterpunch that the Phillies were able to provide. But Jack, I thought the series was over right there, because the Mets took the best punch that the Phillies were able to offer in terms of an elite starting pitcher, and they still won the baseball game. They used an opener. Like, I know it's Kodai Senga, and I know he gave 2 great innings and he made 1 bad pitch, but they took the best punch, used an opener, and they still won the game. Like, it was over. I know the roller coaster ride that we go through, but we should have realized that the moment the Mets did that, they were not losing the series.
That's exactly how I felt. I mean, Kodai Senga, like you said, he gives up one bad pitch, 1 mistake pitch, the 3rd pitch of the game, his first in what, like a month, 6 to 8 weeks. And Schwarber takes advantage of it, and then nothing for 6 innings in between, just like back and forth battle. I mean, shout out to the guys that came out of the bullpen in that game, from David Peterson coming in for 3 innings after Senga, to Reed Garrett for a couple, Phil Maton bounced back, Ryan Stanek ended up closing out that game in the 9th. But the bullpen kept the Mets in the game when the lineup was like you said, mystified by Zach Wheeler. I mean, just a gem of a performance. Like, I think literally the best of his career in terms of swings and misses, and what he's able to do against the Mets. But then, like we saw over and over again, like, down the stretch of the season, but especially in the last couple weeks, as soon as there was an opening, as soon as Zach Wheeler came out of the game, everything changed. The lineup locked in. They took advantage of a bullpen that had taken a lot of days off because of the Phillies bye, and they jumped on that bullpen immediately, and they did not let off the gas. They batted around in the 8th inning. They scored 5 runs, and it was, like you said, it was over from there. We should have just known that it was over from there, because you go 7 innings with, I don't know, they had like 1 or 2 hits, I think, off Wheeler in the entire first 7 innings. He throws 111 pitches, completely stymies everything that the Mets could throw at him. And then as soon as he's gone, the momentum completely shifts the other way.
Because they did what you have to do when you're the road team in a series like this, and you're only going to get 2 home games. You got to win one of the first 2. You have to split. And even though they lost game 2, and listen, we all know that you guys have watched all these games, and we're not going to do a super in-depth recap of the first 3 games of this series. We're going to focus a lot on game 4. But game 2 of the series, despite the Phillies winning that game in walk-off fashion, I just looked at it and I said, okay, the Mets got out to an early lead. The Phillies in front of their home crowd rallied. The Mets immediately responded. The Phillies rallied again off of Edwin Diaz. The Mets responded in the top of the 9th in a hostile environment, and then they walked it off because Tyler McGill just made 1 mistake. Like, the way this series went for the New York Mets, the only way the Phillies were able to do anything against any part of this Mets pitching staff, starting pitching, rotation, the starting rotation, the bullpen, closer, Edwin Diaz, it didn't matter. It was mistakes. It was 1 bad pitch. And over the course of a game, it's like 3 or 4 pitches, and the Phillies somehow have 2 or 3 runs on the board. Like, that was it. That was the MO for the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Mets did a great job, at least in my opinion, of slowing down the bats that were the top of this lineup for the Philadelphia Phillies. Schwarber, Turner, and Harper. They did what they needed to do at key moments against those guys. Did they do it every time? No. Harper hit a big home run. Castellanos hit a big home run. But when they needed to, more often than not, they got the job done. And I texted you after game 2, and listen, we were both a little shaky. Like, all right, that's a tough one to lose. If you would have gotten that one, you would have felt really good about the sweep and getting the brooms out and taking game 3. But I texted you and I said, listen, Sean Manaea has been the guy all year for this team. Sean Manaea hasn't been Sean Manaea his last 2 starts, or at least 2024 Sean Manaea. And I on Monday, early Monday morning, I staked my claim. I said, playoff ace performance incoming. And boy, did Sean Manaea deliver a playoff ace performance in a big way for the New York Mets. It delivered 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. And listen, I don't want to break it down entirely, but Sean Manaea, who lost his aunt earlier in the day and was dealing with that emotion, is dealing with a history in the playoffs that is not very kind to Sean Manaea. He has not thrived. He has not been good in those moments. It's a home City Field crowd who, for the first time in 2.5 weeks, got to see a home baseball game, and it's the third game of the NLDS. So the environment, the atmosphere was electric, and he just delivered. Like it's as simple as he shoved. He was our ace, and we said it all year. We said it on this podcast down the stretch of all those episodes in the lead up to that Brave series. This is our ace. This is the guy I want to go to war with. This is the guy that I want to go to battle with. And I said it on the Locked On Mets postcast that I do. By the way, shout out, follow me on Twitter at Chris Schubert _ so you can get those. Is if you are not on board with Sean Manaea being an ace and being somebody that can help the Mets win a World Series, there's nothing Sean Manaea is going to be able to do to get you on board. So I don't want to hear from you anymore. I'm good. Sean Manaea is a legitimate starting pitcher. He's completely reinvented himself, and he is a frontline number one, or in a really good rotation number two for you. And that is the way he should be viewed. It should not be Sean Manaea takes the ball and you wonder, oh, is this going to be the bad Sean Manaea? No. Sean Manaea has reinvented himself. He is a bona fide frontline starting pitcher. That's how he should be treated.
I think the moment that most exemplified what Manaea has become for the Mets was, and you know exactly what I'm going to say, that sixth inning, right? He gets the top of the lineup to start the sixth inning. He walks Kyle Schwarber. He walks Trey Turner. We get a little bit of a, we're not sure what's going to happen here. The Mets are up 2-0 at this point, thanks to Alonso and Winker with some big homers. We're not really sure, is this going to be the end for Manaea? I Bleav there was a mound visit in there after those two walks from Mendoza, not just from Hefner, and ends up leaving Manaea in the game to face Bryce Harper, lefty on lefty matchup. Strikes out Bryce Harper. Massive strike.
On three pitches.
On three pitches.
He goes changeup, sweeper. And the changeup is the fun part because he hadn't thrown that pitch all year. And he said, you know what? Third time seeing these guys, good luck. Here's our first pitch changeup in on your hands. And Harper swung out of his cleats. He thought it was a fastball that he was going to put on the moon.
I mean, and even if Harper didn't swing, I'm pretty sure it was over the inside corner too. It was just a perfect pitch after, two walks. And, like we had talked about, the only time the Phillies had been able to jump on the Mets was because of mistakes. And so you were just begging Manaea in that at-bat, in that moment, to not make one. So he strikes out Harper on three pitches. And then Castellanos comes up, who famously, I have said, Nick Castellanos always seems to come through in the big moments for the Phillies, particularly against the Mets. The stats obviously don't back this up because of what I'm about to say, but it feels like he's always batting 1,000 against the Mets every single time I want him to get out. He doesn't, but somehow.
Before you talk about this, it is without fail. It doesn't matter who's ahead in the broadcast, because sometimes I'm ahead of Jack, sometimes Jack's ahead of me, depending on where we're watching and how we're consuming the game. But without fail, I know no matter who is ahead of who, when Castellanos steps up in a big spot, the text message is going to read, oh boy, here comes the hit. Every time it's the same thing from Jack every time, because he has this thought in his head that Nick Castellanos always gets a big hit. Now, in fairness, it seemingly always feels like he always has a big hit in a big spot against the Mets, and he's batting 1,000. Now, he didn't on this play because he lined into a double play. So there you go, Jack. There's one example of in a big spot he doesn't come up with a big hit.
That was the one time I was most praying for no big moment. And somehow Sean Manaea, because he is once again our ace. He is the 2024 Sean Manaea is our ace of this team right now. And to have that sequence after back-to-back walks on the two, dangerous hitter, two of the most dangerous hitters in the Phillies lineup, it was really just a perfect example of what he has brought to this team down the stretch and in the playoffs so far. He was great.
No, the game was won right there because I know they had the two solo shots early, and Jesse Winker's ball I still don't think is landed. They got out of that jam and then immediately doubled up the score by scoring 2 runs. The game was over there. That's where the game was won for the Mets. Getting out of that jam, stopping Harper and Castellanos from doing damage, and then immediately tacking on insurance runs. That's where the game was won for the New York Mets. They hold on with a 7-2 victory, and then that leads us into tonight's game where they hand the ball to Jose Quintana, who is not going to wow you with stuff. You're not going to feel impressed. He's humming it up there at 91, 92 with some sink, and he throws a wicked curveball and he throws a changeup, and it's not fast. It's not really elite command of. he just goes up there and just works. Like he just goes up there and he's a lunch pail pitcher. He just goes up there and like, I'm just going to throw this here. And I will put this on the outside part of the plate. And I'll just hope that it's close enough that you chase it. And that's what Jose Quintana does. And he did it in the Milwaukee start, gave them 6 innings of just Jose Quintana masterclass. And then in the game tonight, again, I think did enough. If you were going into this game, the game plan for the Mets would be throw up zeros early if you're Jose Quintana, like 2 or 3 zeros right out of the gate, and then jump on the Phillies with like 1 or 2 runs. Completely put them on the back foot, put them in panic mode, make them think about taking Christopher Sanchez and pulling him into the game, have them get Zach Wheeler down there into the bullpen, like have them just completely on skates, like have them completely confused, have them panicking, have Rob Thompson needing to do everything in his power to just try to scratch a run across the tie of the game, put them on the back foot. And from a game script perspective, and I talk about this all the time in football with bets that I have, from a game script perspective, the Mets did what they needed. The Mets did what they were supposed to do. They just didn't put any runs across the board. The first 3 innings of this game, there was traffic everywhere. It was like you were driving on the LIE or on the Brooklyn Bridge. There's a traffic jam everywhere, and yet nothing came across for the New York Mets. Like they just couldn't put a run across the board to apply maximum pressure. Ranger Suarez was dealing in and out of problems all throughout the first couple of innings. They loaded the bases in the first 2 innings of this game and had no runs to show for it. The Fox broadcast, which this is our time to clear the air. The Fox broadcast, that crew stunk. That crew was bad.
I've never heard more mistakes from a broadcast in my life.
And it's not just because it was Adam Wainwright, and I don't want to hear Adam Wainwright ever call a Mets game ever again. There was just mistakes all over the place. Talking about Edwin Diaz for a 7-out save in game 1. Just nonsense. It was in game 2. Just nonsense from this broadcast constantly. Like just things where I'm like, that's not how baseball in 2024 is even remotely played. And I don't know if you've been watching the game all year. That being said, they put up a graphic that Ranger Suarez was the first player in postseason history to have all that, like 4 hits in both innings and 2+ walks and to have not given up a run. The Mets at one point during the game had 10 at-bats with runners in scoring position, and the Phillies had 10 at-bats for the entire game. Like the fact that the Mets didn't score early, you just felt like, oh no. And then when the way Philly scored with Mark Vientos, who, by the way, his defense has been really solid throughout this postseason, has only made 2 mistakes, and they're 2 very similar mistakes. He's charged in on slow rolling ground balls and hasn't been able to field them cleanly. He's made some super great plays in the hole going into foul territory, and he made laser beam throws over to Pete. He's just struggled twice with this play where he's got to charge in on a slow roller, and he's just kind of in between, and he doesn't field it correctly, and that directly leads to a run. And you text me, and you're like, "Oh no, here we go. This cannot be the way this game ends."
It was just another case of like we said it, multiple times now. The Phillies taking advantage of one mistake that the Mets make, whether it's a pitcher misplacing a pitch or Mark Vientos misfielding a ball. It was the only way the Phillies were able to scratch across a run early was because of that misplay, and it was an unearned run on Quintana. They were swinging and missing a lot of his stuff out of the zone, and I was just worried because there was a point in the game, I believe it was in the 5th inning, the Mets had 9 base runners stranded throughout the first 5 innings of the game. The Phillies had 1 single hit by the start of the 5th inning, and they were the ones in the lead with the 1-0 lead. And I was worried about it, and then things went a little differently after that.
And just like it was in game 3, I thought the 6th inning was really telling because you asked Jose Quintana after giving you 5 innings to go out there and to try to get you maybe 1 or 2 outs in the 6th. And it didn't work out very well. Harper leads off the inning with a double, and that's a big insurance run sitting out there. No lead was safe in this series, it felt like, because of the emotion of just being in these games and just like feeling every single pitch being important. But there's a big difference between 1-0 and 2-0 with the way the Mets have been playing baseball as of late. And so that insurance run felt massive. So Reed Garrett comes into the game. He gets 2 outs, and then super reliever David Peterson, who I after we talk about the Mets and we go through this chronological order of them, winning this series and going to the NLCS, I want to talk about the bullpen moving forward. I want to have that conversation, and I want to give a lot of praise to David Peterson. But he comes in, and he gets out of that jam. And I texted you. Do you want to tell the people? So we have proof of this. We can screenshot it. You can put it on your Twitter account. I can put it on my Twitter account. Can you read to the people what I said to you in the moment before David Peterson got the last out? What I said to you in real time.
I Bleav you said this to me before. I think you sent this to me while Reed Garrett was still in the game. So
Yeah,
this
so
was
before we
early.
even went to David Peterson, I said to my friend, what did I say?
If they hold this at 1, they win the game, IMO.
After, by the way, I earlier in the week said playoff ace performance from Sean Manaea incoming. So I've got a really good feel for this team. I just felt that the emotional lift that getting out of that jam would provide would just be insane. And you know what? It immediately sparked something because in the bottom of the 6th, just like they had done in almost every other inning, it was just traffic everywhere. You needed a traffic cop out there to try to just figure out where everybody was going. They got guys on. JT Realmuto forgot how to play defense, multiple pass balls, moved guys into scoring position, and then they loaded the bases. And then they proceeded to do what they did in the first inning, what they did in the second inning, what they did in the third inning, what they did in the fifth inning, is they immediately had some of the worst at-bats I'd ever seen. After having great at-bats to put themselves into this position, they then had some of the worst at-bats. I love Jose Iglesias. I'm not going to say a bad word about him, but these at-bats were just not great. He was swinging at everything. Francisco Alvarez, just relax, dude. Just put the ball in play. You don't have to hit a home run to Mars. Just relax, dude. Just put the ball in play. You text me at one point, could somebody just hit the ball to the outfield? Like, I didn't even need it to be a sac fly. I just wanted to see a ball leave the infield because they weren't doing any of that. And then, because it's just the way this story's written, Francisco Lindor steps up and Mr. Calm, Cool, Collected hits the biggest home run probably of his life and is just Joe Cool running around the bases.
I was so nervous for the 6th inning because it started. They got traffic on the bases. I have to look at the line. I think it was JD, Starling Marte, and Tyrone Taylor all got on base.
I'll tell you exactly how it works. Martinez worked a single.
Yeah.
And then I immediately texted you and said, get me a pinch runner immediately because JD Martinez does not have wheels. Right. Then there was a passed ball, and then he went to second. And then you texted me. You're like, this is a great time to get a pinch runner out. And then they didn't do that. And then Marte got hit by a pitch on, I think it was a 2-2 count. He got hit on a ball inside. And so then it was first and second. And then another wild pitch moves them over. Then Tyrone walked. So then the bases were loaded. And then Alvarez grounded into a fielder's choice. Again, one of the worst at-bats I've seen Francisco Alvarez had in a really long time. And then Lindor comes up when they make the pitching change to Carlos Estevez. Because I thought it was going to be a criminal offense by Philly to leave Jeff Hoffman in this game. I don't know what Rob Thompson was thinking. I think he left him in 2 batters way too long because Hoffman came in and faced 2 batters in the bottom of the 5th. He faced Alonso and Iglesias and got them both out. So the moment Taylor walks to load the bases, he's faced the minimum. I have no idea why Rob Thompson didn't get him immediately out of the game because Hoffman in the 5th after getting out of that jam sat forever because the Mets made 2 pitching changes in the 6th inning and he sat forever. And relievers don't do that during the regular season, especially not a high leverage guy that's usually pitching in the 8th or 9th inning. And it felt like it affected him. You could clearly see it. And then Lindor just crushes one to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give some credit to the broadcast. I know we said they were horrible.
Terrible.
I sent you a list of mistakes that they made and things that I did not like. But they did say, I think AJ Pierzynski said to Adam Wainwright as the 6th inning was starting, does it take a toll on relievers to come in an inning after they first enter the game, after they've had to wait for so long because of all these pitching changes that the Mets have had in the last inning and how long the last inning took because of some traffic on the base pass there? And Wainwright said, yeah, absolutely. And we saw it happen. As soon as he lost Marte, I felt like was really the point where Thompson should have made a switch because he had him in a 2-strike count, I Bleav. And Marte, to his credit, has been doing a great job of extending at-bats and fouling things off when he doesn't like them. And it got him in a position to get on base eventually. Alvarez, terrible at-bat. And then Lindor I'm speechless because I can't put into words the feelings that Francisco Lindor has made me feel in the last month, 2 months of this season. I every time that I want him to come up big, he comes up. Howie Rose put it best on the radio broadcast for this game. He outdoes himself. Yeah. It is unbelievable. I was pacing around my office here watching the game on the TV, and I went, Francisco, we only need a fly ball to the outfield. There's 1 out and the bases are loaded. We just need a fly ball. We need you to put the ball in play. Just
he did.
Get a base hit and
He did
and
that
they're
too.
winning 2-1.
No,
And
more
oh
than
my
that.
goodness, I I have full body chills just thinking about him hitting that home run.
And I'll add to this because this I think is really important, and I think the people listening to this podcast understand. But maybe if this gets clipped out and we take this clip and we put it out on social media tomorrow, this will be the thing I want people to understand. This dude before the game has to spend 45 minutes just getting his back ready to be able to play. He is not playing 100%. He is very hurt. Like he missed the last 10 games of the season and played in that. He played a little bit in the Brewers series and then played in the doubleheader in Atlanta. Like the dude couldn't walk.
This
Like
was his
walking into the
second.
Brewers series, he looked like he could not walk into the building.
It was his second game at Citi Field since like September 18th tonight.
And so again, I hope, I think most Mets fans are willing to put all of this behind them. I never want to hear a word if he gets off to a slow start. I never want to hear it again. This season and what he has done should forever override a slow start. Did you see what Steve Cohen said after the game? Did you see his
341
quote?
million seems pretty freaking good.
I love that because that tells me that owner, he listens. He knows what people are saying. Maybe not Mets fans, but he knows that there are people out there that thinking that that this was a bad investment, that he gave too big of a contract. And you know what? Right now, I can't tell you the last time I thought about how much Francisco Lindor has been getting paid. It has not crossed my mind one bit. This dude is a superstar. He is an elite level shortstop. He's a top 5, top 10 player in all of baseball. He's a top 3 player at his position. He is awesome. And if you don't celebrate that in this moment during this run, I honestly don't think you're ever going to get a chance to celebrate Francisco Lindor and the greatness that he provides to this team. And he's doing it hurt. He's doing it with an injured back.
And I also got to say, I don't know if you noticed this after the game. I think I saw a tweet pointing it out. Have you ever seen a team celebrating a clinching moment and not storm the mound? Because after Diaz gets that last strikeout of Kyle Schwarber, we'll get to that perfect pitch. But
Yes.
the team stormed Francisco Lindor at shortstop. They didn't storm Diaz on the mound. They stormed Lindor at shortstop.
Well, in fairness, let's not storm Diaz on the mound. Let's try to avoid that because
good point.
the last time we really did that, he got really hurt. So let's try to not do that.
That was
yes.
Team Puerto Rico, but
yes.
but I think that aside, I think them going for Lindor pretty much immediately just speaks to how much he means to the team. Not obviously as fans we know how much he means to the team, but to the players on the team, Lindor is their figurehead. And listen, Chris, at what point do they put the C on that jersey?
Oh, they don't need to make an official announcement. They don't need to actually put a C on a jersey. I don't think they need to do that. This is the captain. This is the leader of the team. It's simple. And I don't need a press release to tell me that. I see the way his teammates feel about him. Yeah. I see the way he leads. That's the leader of the team. And there are other leaders on the team. I think JD Martinez is a leader on the team. I think Brendan Nimmo is a leader on the team. I think Sean Manaea is a leader on the team. There are other leaders across this team that I think at different spots have stepped up. But the one true leader, the guy that when things get tough, I know is going to be able to galvanize the troops, that is Francisco Lindor. And you saw it. And I can't recall a moment in 2015 that was like this. And maybe somebody will correct me. There was a lot of emotion on that field after they won tonight. Now, it was because they had never done it in front of Citi Field, and you saw Brandon Nimmo being super emotional. Francisco Lindor was super emotional. Like a lot of emotion poured out of this team. And they know the job's not done. This was not a pouring of emotion because they think the job is done. They're very aware of what's on the table right now, what they have an opportunity to do. But it just... we can talk about statistics, and we do on this show. We can talk about numbers, and we can talk about pitch characteristics and WOBA and WRC plot. We can do it all, and we will. And when we get to the offseason, we have those conversations. We will discuss deep dives of seasons and metrics and all that stuff. There is a element of team building that is about the personalities that you put together. And I think you have to tip your cap to David Stearns because this dude walked in here and put together a clubhouse of guys that absolutely adore one another. There's not a single problem. There's not a single issue you heard all year. That's a credit to Carlos Mendoza as well. There's a first-year manager working through this. You didn't even hear it when they were 11 games below 500. Francisco Lindor called a players-only meeting and said, we got to do this for each other, and that is it. You didn't hear another peep. And this team deserves all the credit in the world for how they are put together, how they are built, how they've come together as a unit, as a team. They just, it's because it's out of nowhere that I feel this strongly of a connection with this team. And 2015 had a very similar feel, but I feel differently. I love this team. I love watching this team. I love being a part of this team, doing this show. I love being a part of this team, being a fan, watching this team every day. It's just fun. And please do not take what I'm about to say as me waving the white flag, because I do not think so. I think this team has every chance out of any other team to win the World Series. I think it is absolutely on the table.
Yeah.
I do not want any of us to lose this feeling. Remember this. Enjoy it. However this ride ends, because guess what? They're one of the Final Four. 75% of that Final Four are not going to end the season happy, and it could be the Mets. Do not allow that to ruin this joy. Do not allow that to ruin what the next week and a half is going to be like in the NLCS. And so that's my one PSA about it. I'm not going to harp on it, but just please enjoy this if you have not already. Be stressed when the games start, but when moments like this happen, don't, if it ends poorly, if they don't make it to the World Series, or if they go to the World Series and lose, do not forget this ride and forget moments and nights like tonight. Please don't do that. Okay, back to the game, because we got to talk about Edwin Diaz in the ninth inning, because he gave me a heart attack. And that, I think the bigger conversation that we should have here is what this bullpen needs to look like moving forward as we kind of shift into a bit of a preview. And as we're doing this podcast, I will inform everybody that it's like the top of the seventh and the Dodgers are up like 8-0. It's the bottom of the seventh, it's 8-0. So that looks like that's going to a game 5. So we're not going to know who the Mets are going to play in a potential NLCS. So we'll just preview it from the Mets side when we get there. In the playoffs, I think there are like teams have 3 or 4 relievers that they trust that are just the go-tos. This is going to be a weird sentence to say out loud. I think the 3 relievers, David Peterson, Ryan Stanek, and Reed Garrett. I think those are the 3. I think Jose Butto hasn't looked great, although I would argue him now having time off between now and game 1 on Sunday should help. Edwin Diaz having time off after throwing 400 pitches in like 8 days or whatever it was. Having time off is great. And he admitted on the field tonight that in Philly, he was gassed. He had run out of steam. And he kind of smiled and said, but I'm good now. And I think that's exactly what Carlos Mendoza was trying to do, was trying to get his confidence back up, and it worked. So credit to Carlos. Phil Maton, I think, again, is another guy that the days off are going to help, but you got to earn your way back into the circle. You got to earn your way back into the secret society of relievers that we trust. Like, you have to earn your way back in. We've changed the secret handshake. Okay. So you got to learn the new one. And so I think right now, I think it's Peterson. I think it's Ryan Stanek, and I think it's Reed Garrett that are going to be the guys that he leans on in a big way. And I think when you have a guy like David Peterson, and I'm glad we're getting back here because I want to give him credit. This dude was a starter all year. This dude's been a starter his entire Mets career. And this dude was nails for this team at a critical juncture in the summertime. Was awesome. Helped the team down the stretch. Made the pivotal start on the final Sunday of the year to keep this Mets team alive. And this dude has stepped in and has been a super reliever. That's not an easy thing to do.
I just want to point out real quick, you said he's been a starter all year. He wasn't even on the opening day roster for this team.
Well, he was hurt, but yes, but fair enough.
But like, just to put into perspective, like, this is a guy that the Mets had no idea what they were going to see from him to start the year. And now he's pitching a closing 9th inning role in game 3 against the Brewers. He's coming in relief in game 1 against the Phillies after Kodai Senga starts. And he just looks like, and he's coming into game 4 in the NLDS as well. And he just looks like, you know, the best pitcher on the Mets staff, because he's like a utility pitcher. Like, they can have him throw in the first inning, they can have him throw in the 6th and 7th, they can have him throw in the 9th, and he'll get outs. It's just what he's been doing.
I love the aggressiveness by the Mets to do this, because they don't have another lefty reliever that I think is trustworthy. I don't think they want to put Danny Young in a big spot. Like, This is where you need Brooks Raley back in a bad way. Like, you just need Brooks Raley on this team. But credit to the team for using David Peterson in this way, and credit to David Peterson, because it's easy to take the ball and say, yes, I'll do this. I'll be a team player, especially after being a starter all year. But he's not only taken the ball and taken on the responsibility, he's thrived. I mean, he gave up 1 hit in the final game of the Brewers series. It was great. He's been great both times he came in this series against the Phillies. Like, he's been awesome. And so I totally cool with him piggybacking Kodai Senga in game 1 on Sunday. Like, totally fine with it. I think that's the perfect way to go. And so we'll use this to transition. And again, we don't know who the Mets are going to play because it looks like that series is going to go to a Game 5 Friday night between the Dodgers and the Padres. And I'm going to tell you what we are not going to do in this podcast. You may hear other podcasts do this. You may hear other conversations about this. This podcast is not going to tell you who we'd rather play. Don't care. I don't care who we play in the NLCS. Just bring me on an opponent. We'll see you on Sunday in some part of California, whether it's LA or San Diego. We'll see you there for game 1. Kodai Senga will be on the mound. So I think Kodai Senga obviously going to be your game 1 starter. And I think the cool part about this is he threw those 30 pitches in game 1 of this series. So you have to think he can ramp up a little bit and probably be closer to the 60 mark. And if he's efficient with those pitches, we're talking about somebody who can probably give the Mets 4 innings. And you go from 2 innings to giving me 4 innings, and you give me elite Kodai Senga for 4 innings. That's going to set up the Mets well in game 1. You're going to have Luis Severino in game 2, Sean Manaea in game 3, Jose Quintana in game 4, and then 5, 6, and 7, it'll just rotate to the back. And then in a pivotal, what could potentially be a pivotal game 5, you'd have Kodai Senga maybe somewhere around the 80 pitch mark. And now we're starting to talk about a regular start for Kodai Senga. And oh, by the way, Jeff McNeil's probably going to be back on this roster.
Things are starting to really open up for the Mets in a nice way as the playoffs continue. I just remember back when McNeil first got hurt, he said, "Man, I hope you see me back on that field because that means that we've gotten pretty far." And he just said earlier tonight on Wednesday after Game 4, I expect to be on the NLCS roster for the Mets. So getting him back would be really nice. Obviously, Senga has been, he's had 1 start so far, but it looked pretty good. Like his stuff looked pretty good. He was able to, like we said, he made 1 mistake pitch, but he was able to get through the rest of the lineup in those 2 innings that he pitched. So things are looking good. Things are starting to look up. I have a lot of faith in this team, and the Mets are in the Final Four. They have a really good chance to win this whole thing, and opportunities keep popping up with guys coming back healthy and perform, guys stepping up to perform. It's the whole lineup. Like everything is starting to come up Mets right now, and it's hard to not believe right now.
The New York Mets on their path right now to the NLCS took out the NL Central winner with 93 wins, and they took out the team with the best record in the second best record in all of baseball, 95 win Philadelphia Phillies team. The Dodgers won 98 games. The Phillies won 95 games. Those are your top 2 teams in the, not just the National League, but in all of baseball. They've taken out 2 90-win teams on their path. They'll have to take out another one, whether it's the Dodgers or the Padres, and they have not shown me any reason to think that they can't do that. So That's where we're at. We just get to sit back. We get to enjoy tomorrow. We get to sit back, get the popcorn ready for what's probably going to be a really fun Game 5 on Friday. We get to have a nice day Saturday. And then Sunday, it is back to battle. Game 1, more than likely Kodai Senga on the mound for the New York Mets in some part of California in Game 1 of the NLCS. I would like to leave you with this, Jack, because I don't know if you saw this. I'd like to leave you with this quote from the new president of baseball operations for the New York Mets. This comes from Anthony DeComo on Twitter.
Okay.
David Stearns on the narrative that this Mets core of Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, etc. can't win. Quote, and I'm going to clean it up for the audience so I don't have to do any editing. I think they've shown that's bull. You know how David Stearns ended that sentence. I love the bravado and the confidence from the president of baseball ops to say, yeah, okay, you can say what you want. I think we've proven that that's not the case. And this team just has a swagger to them right now that they have not had as a franchise in a really long time.
I think it kind of goes hand in hand with a quote I saw from Steve Cohen in the locker room after the game. I think he was talking to Steve Gelbs, and he said, my mission coming in was to overwrite the narrative of the Mets being this loser team that people can make fun of and kind of a punching bag. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that. And based on what I've seen in the last couple of years, specifically this year with Stearns and, hopefully in the future, I think he's right. I think this is a team that I can have faith in going forward to continue putting together runs like this. That, I don't think 2024 is going to be a flash in the pan going forward just because of what I've seen. This doesn't feel like 2015 where it was Yoenis Cespedes carrying the team to the playoffs and then Daniel Murphy carrying them in the playoffs. This feels like a complete team, a complete roster. You mentioned it earlier with the building of a group of guys that love each other and have a chemistry. This is a good team, Chris, and I think that they really have a shot here. And I want to reiterate what you said. We cannot lose this feeling of how much fun the 2024 Mets have been. I've had so much fun being able to talk about this team with you, being able to celebrate their ups and their downs. And we can't lose sight of where we were at the start of the season and how far they've come.
I know there are people out there that are, worried about 2015 or thinking about 2006 and 2000. They're thinking about all that, right? And they think about all of the bad things that have happened to this franchise and this team in the past. That's not this team. And if there's one thing this team has shown to you this year is they are not built like other teams in the past. They have a resiliency that is just unmatched in baseball. And so the New York Mets are one of the final four teams in baseball. And if you don't think that that at this point they cannot win a World Series, then I wouldn't watch. Just sit on the sidelines because you want to be a part of this journey. This team, I can't. Again, we're doing this podcast. I can't believe that these words are coming out of my mouth in 2024, but I truly believe it. The New York Mets can win a World Series. The New York Mets in 2024 can win a championship. They are going to be one of the final four teams. And to think that they can't beat the Dodgers or can't beat the Padres or can't beat the Yankees or can't beat the Tigers or Royals or Guardians or whoever comes out of the American League, there is no reason to think that. The Yankees, the big bad team on the other side, the Mets only lost 5 more games than the New York Yankees did in 2024. This Mets team can win a championship. They are just 4 wins away from getting that opportunity. It's that simple. The task is in front of them. So I think what we'll do is we'll come back probably Saturday morning after we find out who the team is playing and we can get a full breakdown, the players to watch, the matchups to pay attention to, what we think the starting pitching matchups are going to look like. Rosters will be finalized, so we'll know about, Jeff and things like that. So we'll know on Saturday. So we'll come back with a full preview then, but wanted to give you some raw, some natural, few hours after it all happened, reactions here to the New York Mets. Moving on to the National League Championship Series for the first time since 2015. And with Jack being back on the United States, we will be here the whole rest of the way, recapping it all as it breaks down. So we appreciate you guys joining us here on the journey. However you are listening to podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you are consuming us, please do us a favor, subscribe to the pod, leave us a review. Yes, Jack, you're interrupting the outro.
I apologize, but I just wanted to shout out. We also have been uploading these episodes to YouTube.
That's
so
correct.
if you go on YouTube and look up my name, Jack McKessie, it's right down here. You'll be able to see all these videos, these podcasts in video form as well. So make sure to check that out. If you prefer to watch your podcast rather than just listen.
Correct. We are also going to work on beefing up the social media content for us moving forward. This is a brand new operation. Think about this. We are 10 episodes into this. 10 episodes in, and we're talking about a team that's potentially going to the World Series. So a lot's been going on behind the scenes, so we should have more for you here pretty soon. So make sure you follow us both on Twitter. I'll put that stuff in the show description and the show notes as well. I have to go because a video has come across my screen that is Alex Cohen drinking champagne right out of the bottle. And so that is what I'm going to watch before I head off to bed this evening to celebrate the New York Mets winning and moving on to the National League Championship Series. So we'll be back on Saturday to preview whoever the Mets will be playing in the NLCS. But in the meantime, enjoy the celebration, everybody. Enjoy the couple days of relaxation, and let's go Mets.
I'll be watching Lindor's Grand Slam for the next 12 hours. Let's go Mets.